This video is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Ever feel like you're completely alone? A solitary, friendless speck of dust floating around in a harsh, unforgiving world. Don't freak out, because you're not alone in your abject loneliness. Now, a study from 2021 found that nearly 3 out of 5 Americans report feeling that way. Certain groups are even more likely to feel lonely, such as lower income adults, single parents, and people of color. But the problem seems to overwhelmingly impact young people. A 2019 study found that 22% of millennials have 0 friends, while 27% have 0 close friends. On face, this is depressing, and I wouldn't wish a friendless existence on anybody, but it also makes us wonder, what happens to a society when the bonds of friendship fracture? So, how did friendship become an endangered species? And is there any way to get the proverbial gang back together? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition. Is friendship over? Okay guys, before we get into it, I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor. Now this might shock you all to hear, but at various points in my life, I've mostly lived on instant ramen, frozen pizza, and crappy beer, which was fun at the time, but the older I get, the more I have to leave those former loves behind, which is sad. But that's why I'm so excited about today's sponsor, Vite Ramen. It's a company started by a former fine dining chef and fellow instant ramen fanatic who wanted to see if he can make an instant ramen that was delicious and healthy so that we could keep enjoying it well past our dorm room kitchen era. And my God, he did it. He really did it. That's why now I get to enjoy Vite Ramen with all the joy of a 21-year-old who just finished playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater for 6 hours, except without all the guilt. They're also a company that treats its workers well, with things like mental health days, paid time off, health insurance, and 401ks. I might have to apply. And as we all know, happy employees make more delicious noodles. So if you want to try Vite Ramen, and why wouldn't you? Click the link in the description to get a bundle that gives you free shipping in the contiguous United States. And don't forget to use special code Wisecrack at checkout for an additional 10% off. That's viteramen.com/Wisecrack. Or just click the link in the description and use the code, you guessed it, Wisecrack. And now, back to the show. To figure out if friendship is a relic of 1950s soda fountains, it helps to look at what friendship is. And luckily, the ancient Greeks have us covered on that front. They conceived of 3 different kinds of love. Agape, which is love of God for man and man for God. Eros, which is a sensual, passionate love. And philia, the love we feel for friends and family. They also have us covered on the old men cuddling with 13-year-old boys, drinking wine and talking about love front. Read Plato's Symposium if you think I'm making this up, but that's for another video. Now, Aristotle built on this, breaking friendship down into 3 different categories. Now, there's friendships of pleasure, where we love the enjoyment we get from a person. Friendships of utility, where friendship serves a useful purpose. And his ideal form, friendships of virtue, where you love someone because they show virtuous characteristics. As Aristotle put it, friendship should involve a concern for your friend for his sake and not for your own. If you're in it for the pleasure or utility, that's all about what your friend provides you. But in friendships of virtue, you love someone for who they are. Now, philosophers continued mulling over the nature of friendship for years, identifying some necessary features of these bonds. There's mutual caring, where you vicariously partake in your friend's joys and disappointments without ulterior motive. Another way to think of this is empathy. Such caring implies that we value our friend on an intrinsic level, irrespective of their millions of TikTok followers or sick apartment rooftop view. Then there's intimacy, i.e. depth in relationships, fostered through mutual self-disclosure, which creates vulnerability, bonds of trust, and empathy. Now, such empathy, according to Aristotle, makes intimate friendships something of a mirror. We come to know ourselves in knowing a friend, someone who reflects back the best and worst parts of us. Then there's shared activity, i.e. engaging in joint pursuits, stuff like playing sports, going out to coffee, building a model Millennium Falcon. Importantly, such activity should be engaged in for the joy of the activity itself, not for the utility. The philosophical value of friendship is pretty well established, but in recent years, scientific data has emerged about its importance to our physical and psychological health. The Mayo Clinic found that adults with strong social connections are less likely to suffer from major health problems like depression or high blood pressure, and statistically have increased longevity. Other findings suggest strong friendship lowers stress levels. Friendship also increases self-love, self-esteem, and overall mental health. Data supports the inverse as well, namely that not having friends contributes to everything from violent crime to binge drinking. It even leads to a risk of cardiovascular disease so pronounced, the study likened it to having a history of smoking. When it comes down to it, loneliness can literally kill you. So why has something so obviously good, which makes us feel and live so much better, become so rare? Ancient Greek perspectives on friendship dominated Western culture well into the 19th century. Though friendships evolved to fit each era, they were largely place-based and communal. This changed with the 19th century rise of urbanization, which uprooted traditional rural communities but provided new urbanites a host of ways to find new amigos, ranging from dining clubs to art associations to even so-called lonely clubs created to ease feelings of isolation. This suggests not that there wasn't loneliness, but that there were tangible ways to combat it. Now, the early 20th century brought more of the same. A scholar, Mark Peel, argues, more than family, kin, or faith, friendship was the social glue of modernity. This was especially true for immigrants dislocated from family and culture. By the mid-20th century, friendship was in a real boom, aided by everything from post-war affluence, which made things like dinner parties more affordable, to the mainstreaming of the automobile, which made friends easier to reach, to the rise of prominent political movements, which united groups of people around shared convictions. Shout out to political friends, which some of us call comrades. Things weren't perfect, of course. Best-selling book The Lonely Crowd by David Reisman debuted in 1950, arguing that though people were extremely adept socially, they tended to focus on building a wide network over fostering deep friendships. This suggests something of an inverse relationship between one's breadth of friendships and the depth of those friendships. When that ratio is out of whack, even a wide social network seems to lead to more loneliness. And yet, something about those wide, well-honed networks changed. As Robert Putnam famously argued in 2000 in his book Bowling Alone, the last third of the 20th century saw a precipitous decline in communal activity, ranging from civic engagement to workplace networks. He attributed this change to things like generational shifts, television, suburban sprawl, and increased work demands. Just a year before, philosopher Zygmunt Bauman argued that liquid modernity, i.e. the current condition of globalized capitalism, was characterized by dissolved social and communal bonds and the unholy trinity of uncertainty, insecurity, and unsafety. He writes, "In a liquid modern life, there are no permanent bonds, and any that we take up for a time must be tied loosely so that they can be untied again as quickly and as effortlessly as possible when circumstances change. The transient and amped up mobility of contemporary life, according to this thinking, is an important culprit for the dissolving of friendship networks." Theories like this extend into the present day, with thinkers identifying increased individualism, competition, and atomization as culprits. Academic Norina Hertz argues that today we're still dealing with the ramifications of the neoliberal shift in the 1980s, which, she says, has made us see ourselves as competitors, not collaborators, consumers, not citizens, hoarders, not sharers, takers, not givers, hustlers, not helpers. People who are not only too busy to be there for our neighbors, but don't even know our neighbors' names. In this way of thinking, the decline of friendship isn't about you personally being awkward at parties. It's a structural shift in the way we collectively relate or choose not to relate to one another. But quick shout out to everyone else who's awkward at parties. Aren't they weird? It's like if you don't have someone to talk to and you're just there alone, it feels horrible. Importantly, some of this sense of alienation is aided by the decline of what sociologist Ramon Oldenburg and Dennis Brissett dubbed third places in our communities. These are the bars, nail salons, and community centers where we can get together with other people, intentionally or not. There's been a steep decline in such spaces in recent years due to things like gentrification. According to academic Jessica Finlay, Americans may be losing access to key services, goods, and amenities, in addition to community sites that help buffer against loneliness, stress, and alienation. And there's been a huge decline in investment in non-commercial third spaces like town squares or libraries. The latter lost more than 40% of its funding in the US between 2008 and 2019. Another blow to community building has been the simultaneous decline of the shopping mall, which are commercial, but technically they're free to prowl around with your pals, and they were essential to any millennial teenager's social life. My main mall was the Oviedo Marketplace Mall. Let me know what your teenage mall was, fellow millennials, and also if you've ever been to the Oviedo Marketplace, definitely let me know because that'd be crazy. This all means that unless you can afford an $8 beer, your opportunities for socializing outside of work and home are limited. And to the commenter who's going to say this in advance, you're totally right. $8 for a beer is crazy, but where we are and where we film our videos is a crazy place to be. God bless you for living someplace where happy hour has $3 high lifes. That's awesome. But you might be thinking that this is just boomer logic that fails to recognize that while we might not have the same types of physical spaces as we once did, that digital space has created avenues for friendship and socialization that far transcend what you used to get at the Elks Lodge. And to be clear, there are many positives about digital spaces and friendships. A place where I go for digital friendship is Wisecrack Live. It's our stream. It happens on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific. But I legit think of a lot of you there as my friends. You know who you are, fellow lords of the chat. I'll see you soon. But hey, you should check it out if you're looking for digital friendship. But at the same time, it may actively foster loneliness. As philosopher Umberto Eco argues, the internet is one thing and its opposite. It could remedy the loneliness of many, but it turns out it has multiplied it. And it generates its own remedies to eliminate this isolation. Twitter, Facebook, which end up increasing it. This is borne out by some data. One study in 2017 found that those who visited social media sites 50 or more times per week had triple the odds of feeling socially isolated as their counterparts who use these sites less than 9 times a week. 50 a week, I realistically probably open the Twitter app 50 times a day. I should stop that. In a 2020 study, 7 out of 10 heavy social media users said they felt lonely, a whopping 20% more than light social media users. Yet another study found that spending too much time on your phone can make face-to-face interactions feel like work, causing them to be less fun. In fact, the mere presence of phones during a meal made participants more distracted, and they got less enjoyment from their interactions. And another study of 3,000 people, deleting Facebook was up to 40% as effective in curbing well-being as going to therapy. This makes sense when we think about the kinds of interactions encouraged by social media. Hertz argues that social media's tendency to encourage perfectly curated visions of our lives perpetuates inauthenticity, which is clearly counter to the philosophical ideal of intimacy in friendships. It's notable that we often refer to our social media community as audience, rather than, well, community. And this obviously implies a performative aspect. We may engage in mutual disclosure when we tweet about our bowel movements, but it's calculated and calibrated to make us seem our wittiest rather than our most authentic. There's the additional layer of competitiveness, in which we're all players in a game where some win lots of likes and others get crickets, which doesn't exactly make for a chill hang. Now, of course, social media, for many, provides an important lifeline, keeping us in contact with people we might not otherwise communicate with. Some studies even suggest that these interactions can ameliorate some amount of our loneliness. And if scrolling through Instagram gives a dose of life-enhancing humanity, then seriously, that's a wonderful thing. But from the context of the Lonely Crowds analysis, where mid-century folks' attempts to cultivate wider networks led to feelings of loneliness, you have to wonder, what's the actual effect of trying to cultivate your community of 40 or 400 or 400,000 followers? If breadth and depth of friendship tend to be inversely related, social media arguably runs the risk of endangering our capacity or desire to form the kinds of long-term friendships that sustain us and make us healthier and happier. Importantly, if most human interaction used to take place in non-commercial public spaces, today we're increasingly transferring it to these online, privately owned commercial spaces. We discussed this in more detail in a recent video on free speech online. Check it out if you want. That means our friendly online interactions are entirely monetized, interrupted by ads, broken down into raw data that's then sold to mega corporations, and I mean, f*** it, it's kind of depressing. But of course, friendship still exists. And even if we live most of our lives online, there are communities and spaces where we can meet new people and foster existing relationships. However, it seems that this type of friendship is often still less than when compared to what Aristotle conceived of. While he imagined virtuous friendships where you strive to better one another, friendship today often looks like offering or pursuing online social capital via shared GIFs, group text, and liked social media posts. And while none of these interactions are inherently bad, they all do a lot more in the realm of data collection than they do in the cultivation of virtue. But what do you guys think? Has the peak era of friendship already passed us by? Are we cursed to be lonely individuals glued to our screens in hopes of connection? Or do we just got to find a good bowling league or tavern? Please let us know what you think in the comments. Also, let us know, are there ways that you have found to make new friends as an adult? It's really hard. We've all been there, and maybe that would be a helpful thing for others to see. I don't know, why not give it a try? Thank you so much to our patrons for being a part of our community. It means a lot to us. If you're interested in joining, meeting some new people, getting some extra Wisecrack content, there is a link in the description. And thank you so much to all of you for just giving us the space to explore ideas like this. It means a lot, and we really appreciate you commenting, liking, subscribing, all this stuff. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.